Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about what indies need to hear, but rarely do. You know, between making a great game and having the drive to do it, it's still only half the battle. Indie studios love chasing creativity, but often struggle to establish core business fundamentals that can turn passion into profit. So that's why today we're going to pull back the curtain on what it really takes to stand out and succeed in games. From funding pitfalls to publishing strategies, we'll unpack the often overlooked realities of running a successful studio, what founders often get wrong, and how to de-risk the shift towards smarter sustainability. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey, everybody, and we're back. And today with us, I have Jason Della. Jason, how is it going, man? And thank you so much for being here on the show today.
Hey, Andrew. So great to be here. Finally, I feel it was a long time coming.
Yeah, it definitely has been. And, you know, folks, for those of you who don't know Jason Della, I mean, I don't even know if he needs an introduction, but we're going to go and give one anyways. He is the co-founder of Execution Labs, also an associate member of the Technoculture Art and Games Research Center at Concordia University, board chair at Gameplay Space, and even a former executive director of the IGDA for, 9 years, huh?
Yeah. Well, that's. I mean, I've been in the industry for 30 years, so not 9 years of that. Well, it seems long. It was a really interesting time. I'm sure we'll touch on that, and actually, you can add to the list. I just announced also that I joined Griffin Gaming Partners as a venture partner. So additional role.
There's always something going on and always good stuff. And, you know, really in the name of, you know, helping others, improving this industry and everything else. So all great stuff. So, as Jason said, he's been around the block, I guess you could say, a few times, right? And I mean, but here's the thing, because we're not even going to go into really any of the titles. There's just been so much you've been involved with and stuff. But I thought one was an interesting fact is just, one of your first credits was the original Baldur's Gate back in 1998.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long time ago. I started was the mid 90s. In those early days, I was more on the hardware and graphics side of things. We were working on the 3D chips, some of the original 3D chips, before NVIDIA and all that kind of stuff. And we were working with BioWare to debug their like alpha channels on their rasterizing, because Unreal didn't exist, Unity didn't exist. There were no engines. Everything was coded, by hand, and they were having some problems with their rendering. So we were going in there and working with them to debug stuff. But funny enough, it was mainly the bugbears. It's the D&D game, so the bugbears had like a pink halo around them. They just like were super hard to fix. So we debugged the bugbears.
I love it. It's like really going back, very different, but it reminded me of like I was when I went to film school, I was one of the last people that actually cut on a Steinbeck, actual cutting film, not what we do now. At any rate, awesome stuff there, and just some other cool recognitions too. I mean, you got the Ambassador Award at the GDC, which is amazing, and you even named Game Developer Magazine Power 50. So lots of cool.
Rest in peace to Game Developer.
Yeah. I know. It's so sad, but I mean, I would still throw that around. Why not? Like let it live. Just like people, that still wear Whalers jerseys. Sorry, hockey fan here. All right, and I'm just curious too. You've done a lot. You continue to do a lot. When you're not doing stuff, or when you're trying to unplug or whatever, what are some things that you're doing in your spare time, hobbies or whatever? What do you do to unwind, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of work, a lot of travel doesn't leave too much time. I try to, still game, of course. Although have not played Baldur's Gate 3, I'm just too intimidated by the amount of, but I'm a bit of a cocktail nerd. I do like to get in a good, well-made cocktail, and then for fun, I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That's kind of my keeps me in shape and also helps with the mental health. And instead of doing yoga, I twist people into pretzels.
That I don't know. Pretzel twisting sounds pretty fun. So awesome, awesome. Well, thank you for showing that, and appreciate getting to know you a little bit more. And we're gonna do that in a moment. We're gonna dive a little bit deeper, but before we do that, I understand that you have a pretty cool, exciting offer going on. I mean, and we're not going to get into specifics right now, but there's something you have for listeners as we get to the end of the show, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've got some masterclass stuff that's going to be on sale this week, so we'll share more details on that goodies.
Excellent. So, folks, make sure to stick around so you can get those details and everything else. Definitely worthwhile. But hey, now let's dive in a little bit deeper with you, Jason. And to do that, folks, most of you already are familiar, but we're going to throw him into the Q box round. And that's just a few random questions I prepared here for Jason today. So, Jason, without further ado, are you ready for the Q box round? Excellent. Oh, he's pumped. Yeah, I could see it in his face, folks. All right. First one is, name one thing that motivates you every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to say. It's like, side note, I don't drink any coffee. I don't consume caffeine. And people are like, how do you get up in the morning? I'm like, I don't know, man. I just jump out of bed ready to conquer the day. I'm so excited. It's just a passion for the game industry, a passion for game developers. It's hard to kind of pinpoint it to one thing, but I don't know. I just wake up every day, ready to kick some ass.
Awesome. Love it. All right. The next one is, and honestly, folks, I'm going to admit this is the first time, and a new one for this one is, what's your favorite cocktail?
Yeah, well, I already hinted that I'm a bit of a cocktail kind of foreshadowing there. I mean, it's really hard to say, but my two go-tos are probably the classics between a Negroni or a dry martini. Those are good stiff drinks, and if well made, are sublime.
Excellent. All right, and last but not least, and the staple here on the show is, what game are you playing now?
Yeah, I mean, I the one I'm playing right now is Assassin's Creed Shadows. I played the very first Assassin's Creed. How many years ago? I was buddies with Jade and Patrice and the team at Ubisoft Montreal. Of course, I'm in Montreal, and I never played another Assassin's Creed since that. It's like oh. I enjoyed it. I 100%ed it. Got every freaking flag and all that kind of crazy. And I said, okay, I enjoyed what that was, and I don't need to do another one. But I'm also a fan of feudal Japan. I know folks on the podcast can't see my background, but you do see a nice sword, Japanese sword in the background. But so yeah, trying to finish up Assassin's Creed Shadows. Right before that, I did the very charming Another Crab's Treasure, which I thought was really, really nice game.
Excellent. Well, Jason, thanks so much for diving in, sharing a little bit more about yourself. But now, folks, we're going to get into the conversation. And like I said in the intro, is we're going to talk about, something we need to hear more about, which is, what indies, you guys, everyone needs to hear, but we rarely do for lots of different reasons. So what exactly does that mean? Well, we're going to get into it by kicking off with, Jason, I mean, you've worked with a huge range of studios, but in light of all that, everything different and what people are doing, what's the one pattern you keep seeing that gets in the way of their long-term success?
Oh my goodness. I mean, we can talk hours just on this one question. I mean, there's so many kind of patterns. I mean, obviously a lot of it comes down to the business side of things, where so many game developers, game studios, are really coming at it from a passion, creation, artistic point of view as designers, artists, programmers, etc. They're really not, thinking deeply about the business side of things, and understanding what it means to be building a studio, building a business is sort of a separate thing from building a game. and there's a couple of patterns. I mean, there's many patterns, but there's sort of two things I want to lay down. One is solving for success, which means that you need to understand what kind of success you're trying to achieve. So, for example, if you're putting a studio together and you're going to embark on this journey, being an indie and try to succeed and be a professional and earn a living by making games, not just as a hobby and a fun pastime, and we're starting a new studio. It's okay, Andrew, we got to make a living, pay rent, put food on the table for our families. Okay, so we have to make revenue. All right, well, let's go make a puzzle platformer. That seems like a fun game. We played a bunch of those when we were kids, and that's something we can achieve in a relatively sort of a short time frame. And you're not aligning with success, because a puzzle platformer, sadly, these days has a very poor chance of making any money. It's one of the genres that's really struggling. It's oversaturated and underperforms. And so you're kind of you solved for what you wanted to make, what you thought was fun. You solve for what you can do in a relatively short time frame or the resources you have, but you didn't solve for what could succeed. And so then ultimately you fail, because you make a puzzle platformer, even if it's fun, you make no money. Now that also requires that we've discussed what kind of success we're trying to achieve, right? If I say, well, I want to be a millionaire and make tons of money making awesome games, and you say, well, I don't care about money, I just want to make art and win awards, we're going to go in very different directions. It's hard to kind of build a studio together if ultimately we're sort of competing. I'm trying to make something that's going to make money, you're trying to go win awards and whatever. So we as founders, as co-founders, need to have a real conversation of like, okay, hey man, like, what does success mean to you, and what does success mean to me? Are we both trying to go after the same success? So that's this kind of success alignment. Solving for success is kind of one like huge pattern I see, essentially from all studios all over the world. And then the other one would be not understanding that you are ultimately in the fan building business. If you ask a game developer, a game founder, whatever, and say, hey, what business are you in? Like 99% of the time, they're going to say, well, I'm a game developer. I'm in the business of making games. Like that, I'm a studio. I'm an indie. My business is making games. And if that's the mindset, like, you're going to fail. And if your business is just making games, then go do work for hire. Go get a job at Ubisoft. Like don't even be an indie. It's not worth it. So you have to reframe it as being in the fan building business, growing an audience, building a community, capturing a fan base, which then also implies that you've identified who your fans should be or could be, which then requires you to sort of like I often give the example, like I'm a space nerd, I like all things sci-fi, whatever. If I were to build a studio, I'd say it's going to be a studio to go after sci-fi nerds and geeks that love Star Wars, Star Trek, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm not really like sitting there building a game. I'm building a studio that's going to go capture all of the sci-fi nerds out there in the world, and I'm going to make cool sci-fi games to kind of make them fall in love with me. And like, that's how I build a long-term sustainable business, is really about building a fan business, as opposed to I'm just trying to make one game at a time. So that also is kind of an important pattern that's very difficult for most game developers to kind of grasp. But when you tell them, they're like, oh crap, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And their mind starts to kind of shift.
Yeah. Those are all, like, as you said, really key ones. And I love how you broke those down too. I mean, especially the first one, like, it like solving problems, right? What problems are we solving, and whose problems are we solving? And the way I like to distill this, it sounds like, are you solving for the want, or are you solving for the need, right? Because great examples. Hey, we need to put food on the table. We need to pay like expenses and things like that. And what's important to you, and either can be fine, right? But it's a matter like what is that problem you're ultimately wanting to solve for or needing.
And Andrew, I mean, you're absolutely right. That there is no right or wrong answer. You just need to know what it is.
Yeah.
And that we're aligned in it, right? And so, if we've got day jobs and we're just doing this to learn and have fun, and we're doing it on the weekend, and we end up shipping a game that makes a couple $1,000 and now we've got some beer money, but like, great, huge success. We had fun, we learned, we hung out, we made a little hobby game, like fantastic. But if we're trying to build a business, pay wages, put food on the table, we have to be aligned that's the direction that we're going in. And this notion of solving for success is also something I see a lot in terms of like development decisions. So for example, another example, if I'm doing like a party game, multiplayer, co-op, whatever, and it's certainly much easier to do it couch co-op only, like local, not worry about network code and put in a networking, all that online multiplayer, whatever. It's like, it's just gonna be couch co-op. It's our first game. We've never done online before, and it's gonna cost a lot, take time, whatever. So you're solving that problem. You're like, okay, the wise thing, remove online, we'll make it local only. So you solved the problem, but you did not solve for success, because we know, from the data, that local only or couch only co-op games don't sell. Like, they sell horribly. So if all you did was like a few minutes of research to realize party games, local only, make no money. Party games or co-op games with online multiplayer have a way better chance of making money. So you made kind of a smart, pragmatic, problem-solving decision to remove the online, ship the game, not have to worry about the code, but you made a horrible success decision because now you have no chance to make money.
Right.
So these are often, like developers' own sort of smartness to solve problems kind of bites them in the ass sometimes, because they're solving these technical problems, which ultimately means that they're guaranteeing their failure.
Yeah. And I'm just going to take this back, that example again, too, because some of you might be thinking like, okay, but for me, whatever else, it's not realistic to then solve for success. So, but then it's just posing other questions then, right? It's like, okay, if that's the path you really want to go down, let's say couch co-op, now you have to, it's like, we totally can't go into it today, but you got to dive deeper, asking more questions and stuff from that same framework, essentially. Okay, this is what you want to do. Then how are you going to solve for success within this genre? Even though you already know kind of odds are stacked against you, data supports this. So what are you going to do different? Like, all those types of other things that you got to go down. And the same thing applies to the other end. Okay, I know this is a lot for me to bite off and chew, but that's solving for success. But then it's like, either way, you're going to face obstacles. You're going to face problems that you have to solve. And again, at the end of the day, it matters. What matters to you? What does success look like? And that question isn't just you answer it once and done. It's going to change probably.
Yeah, it's rolling. But I mean, it's like, if we've decided we're building a real business and we're going to pay ourselves and put food on the table, right? And we're doing a party game, and we do our research, it's like, oh crap, if we want any chance to achieve that success, we have to include online. Oh, but neither of us know online. Oh, well, how do we solve for success? Oh, we have to go hire someone, get some middleware that costs more.
Yep.
Okay, well, now we have to find like you have to solve all those questions to achieve the success that you're trying to achieve. You don't kind of solve the problems and remove them, and then you essentially painted yourself in a corner where now that the success you wanted is no longer possible.
You're always going to be solving. So
yeah, exactly.
And last thing you mentioned about building. You're building a business of building fans, and I love that framing too, because again, I think so much of it, I see it too. So much of it is led with passion. We're not thinking about, hey, who really matters in a lot of this too, especially if we're looking at, let's say, commercial success, right? We're looking at the players. We're looking at those people and the fans of these things. And you know what? This is a good segue into another area I want to dive into about strategy, right? And even survival, because when we're thinking about this long term, what are we really going to gain from this? How should indie studios be thinking about, sustainability beyond just one game? And why might this matter to current or potential stakeholders? And stakeholders, folks, I'm defining this in the early stages all the way on. So early stages meaning you, the one making these games, and maybe some friends that might be investing or helping, who knows? But how should people be thinking about sustainability beyond one game?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really about the fan base, right? It's the community, and it's all intertwined. But essentially, you're using the games to build your fan base as opposed to the other way around. And the more fans you build, the more sustainable your studio becomes. First game, brand new studio, nobody knows who you are. We've identified space nerds as who are the fans we go after. We make our first little, space shooter game, whatever. And so maybe we don't have a blockbuster success, but it's our first kind of foray, and we accumulate some space nerd fans. And now game 2 is going to be another game for more space nerds. And now we're not starting from scratch. It's kind of like a game studio is a roguelike game, right? I've done one run. Launching a game is the boss. And maybe, I didn't win or get huge success. But now when I come back to do another run, I'm not starting from zero. I've got some XP. I've got some coins. I picked a few upgrades. And then I go again. And so each time you launch a game, it's like another run in the roguelike, and I'm accumulating or sort of stacking those resources. And the most valuable resource is the eyeballs, it's the fans, it's the community. And so imagine we've done 2, 3, 4 Space Nerd games. By the time we get to the 5th Space Nerd games, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of Space Nerd fans that love us, think we're cool, have kind of followed us along the way, brought their other Space Nerd friends. And by the time we're launching the 4th, 5th game, it's like the day of launch, we break even. Then it's the day of launch, we profit. Then the day of, and so you're building, and essentially you're rolling your fans from game to game, because we're going after space nerds. We're not changing genres. We're not switching platform. We're sort of sticking to our fan base. So that is really what creates the long-term sustainability is sort of that roguelikeness and stacking the fans from game to game.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll share a quick story about that. For a brief time, I worked with Tobias Springer, Shapes and Shapes 2. And we had a brief conversation once. And one thing he shared with me, he's like, I am going to continue, making just, whether it's, in the same IP or other extensions of this game until that audience goes away, because why else would I want to start from scratch and everything else? Now, I'm sure for some people that might be a bit extreme if we see, Shapes 9, but who cares if it's fun? People still enjoy it. That's great. Good for everybody. But that doesn't mean you have to try to reinvent the wheel, start from scratch with a new audience, like you're saying. Like, there's lots of ways to do it. And I think that's a great example of how, leverage those resources you have. And I don't mean to downplay players or people as resources, but it really is when you look at things from a business perspective. So love that you shared that too, because lots of times people overlook those things.
Well, and also what it means is that even if a game doesn't necessarily sell like hotcakes, it's still another vector that you use to get in front of the sci-fi nerd fans,
right?
And capture them. And I mean, obviously the preference is that, they buy and you make revenue. But if you kind of reframe it like that, everything you do is about capturing those fans, and you kind of grow from there.
Yeah. It's like, instead of, you're maintaining this like a garden, right? Or a tree. What do you do when the tree, when it gets to a certain point? Do you cut it down and plant a new one? You're never going to get fruit that way.
Yeah, I mean, one criticism I'll often get from developers is like, okay, well, I like sci-fi, but I also like D&D, and I also like, this and that, and I like, horses, and what, like how do I explore all my creative, endeavors and pursuits? And because what I'm suggesting is, like, once you sort of decide you're going after the sci-fi nerds, then like you're in that business until it collapses. And it's a fair concern from developers, who have many creative pursuits or passions. At that point, you need to create like multiple labels, multiple studios, right? Like you can't like if I'm building Sci-Fi Nerd Game Studios Inc., and I've sort of declared that we're going after the sci-fi space, I can't start making horse games. Like I have to create a subsidiary or another studio or a side label, to kind of then collect all the horse fans.
Yeah.
And call it, Horse Interactive or whatever,
But I'm glad you bring that up, because it kind of goes back a little bit too when you're talking about, in a different way, defining that success, right? But and part of that relates to your vision. So if your vision is to like, hey, I want to be lots of different types of experiences, like either, one way, subsidiaries, things like that, or another way is like, what if you find creative ways to maybe stay in that particular theme or genre or whatever, but you're incorporating all these other elements that you like and really showcasing that in a new and creative way. That, who knows, that could be a big differentiator and something that really, stands out. So lots of different ways to go about doing it. Just because you're looking to being sustainable in a similar audience doesn't mean you have to typecast yourself, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. I mean, ultimately, what you're thinking is the fans that I currently have, will they be fans of the next thing I make?
Exactly.
And will those fans be fans of the next thing I make? And it's not always going to be 100%, because maybe it's sci-fi, but I'm doing, a colony sim builder, or maybe it's sci-fi, but then I'm going to do a 360-degree space shooter. So there's still some kind of edges, genre differentiation that maybe not all players like. Builders versus shooter, but you have to imagine that a certain large percentage are still kind of in alignment.
Yeah. So really good points there too. I want to shift things for a moment, because I know this is, I'm sure, still top of mind for a lot of people, even with how the landscape has been changing a bit. But, people out there still, pitching, looking for a publisher to partner with for whatever the reason. In light of that, and hey, deals are still happening. They might not be as frequent as they have been in the past, but they do still happen. This considered, and for those who are considering this, what would you say is the most overlooked factor when studios are pitching for funding?
Yeah, I mean, this is one. We can talk on this for hours and hours. Deals are getting done, and in fact, anecdotally, I would say the same number of deals are being done. The issue is there's just way more games out there.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So if Devolver signs 5 games a year, they have always signed 5 games a year. They're still signing 5 games a year, but instead of getting 1,000 pitches, they're getting 2,000 pitches. Yep. Right. So the volume of no's increases, even though the rate of the number of yeses is the same. So that's where sort of the perception of oh crap, deals are not getting done. It's just there's way more no's, even though it's the same number of yeses. Roughly speaking. So there's two things I want to touch on here. One is a viable business case. And this comes back to our earlier comments about, business mindset and success and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, many developers, when they go pitching, they're pitching to solve their missing money problem. Oh crap, we need money. I've got this problem. I can't pay my coder. I can't pay for art. I need more art. I need I got to go fix this problem. Let me go see who wants to help me with my missing money problem. And the answer is nobody. Nobody wants to help you with your missing money problem. They don't care. Nobody cares. That's your pitching to your rich uncle or something. So again, it's a mindset shift where you can't go out into the world pitching your missing money problem. You have to pitch an opportunity. You have to get people excited about the opportunity of this amazing game you're building, and the fans you're going after, and how, the genre is a healthy genre that has a high potential of success, and what you're doing is going to capture some of that success. And so really it's about sort of when you pitch, yes, it's about you and the team and your credentials. It's about the game, the gameplay, the art, the style, all the stuff about the game, but it has to include the business case in terms of who is the audience, and what's the go-to-market plan, and how much funding do you need, and what's the likely revenue targets, and all this kind of stuff. So you have to present a business case. So that's kind of like first and foremost. The next one is essentially evidence that anyone wants this game. So kind of market validation. And this is something that's been shifting in the past few years. What I'm calling is the shift to evidence-based investing, because there's so many games out there. The ones that come to the table that have already been announced, have a bunch of trailer views, already have Discord subs, are already collecting wish lists, and getting reactions from would-be players, would-be buyers, are the ones that are going to get more attention from the people with money. it's a bit lazy on the part of the money people, but it's also understandable. If I'm getting 1,000 pitches, every few months, and some of them are coming and already have 100,000 wish lists and 1 million trailer views, well, the perceived risk of those ones goes way down.
Right.
Whereas if you had your, Mars Colony sim that you've been coding in your basement for 2 years that you never showed to nobody, and there's no validation, no evidence, there's no fan reaction, no nothing. It's just sort of human nature. I'm going to lean towards the one that has the 1 million views and the 100,000 wish lists. It's unfair. It's like, again, it's sort of the person with the money is being a bit lazy, but I think that's the reality today. So a lot of developers are focused on making their demo, making their, beta or alpha or whatever, vertical slice, whatever you want to call it. And they go out into the world to pitch with just sort of that dev piece and have not done any market validation. And basically they just kind of get punted. It's like, they don't get a yes, they don't get a no. It's like, oh yeah, it looks cool. Come back in 3 months when you've made more progress. And you just kind of keep getting punted down the road until you say, well, hey, we announced and we got 1 million trailer views. And then all of a sudden now, it's on for real.
Right. I mean, key thing there, and again, it's always a challenge and everything else, but reduce that perceived risk. Because if you take a moment, put yourself in their shoes. Yeah. If you're just funding projects left and right, or let's say you're not really prioritizing what those projects are that you are funding, and they don't meet the goals or they fall below, guess what? You're out of business pretty soon as a publisher. So it's if you look at it that way, sometimes these things can get emotional and feel personal. It's not the case. And if you can put yourself in their shoes, it's going to make a difference and probably even help you frame things differently and how you're doing. Hey, I get this. I know what they want. I have a really good idea of this now. Taking that time to think about what's going to make a difference for them. Right. And then who knows, that could really, make some big changes down the road.
Well, and Andrew, I often talk about empathy, enough when talking about pitching, we always think it's sort of like about hard cash and, cold business and whatever. But in fact, as you alluded to there, it's really about empathy. It's about understanding who you're pitching to, what is their business model, what matters to them, what success are they trying to achieve, and then seeing how you fit into that. And really it's about kind of, alignment of the opportunity or again, aligning success, right? We talked about success alignment amongst the founders of the studio, but now if you're going to take on a business partner, like a publisher, investor, or whatever, like that is also a form of alignment that has to occur.
Absolutely.
Right? If we're trying to get money out of a publisher because we're making this art piece that we believe is going to win awards, but it's going to make no money, well, they don't care. They're not here to fund our art. Like they're in business to sell games. So they're not going to help us with our little art piece. So again, it comes down to kind of alignment.
Yeah. A quick story I'll share too. When I was in college, film school as a film student, I was also in student government, and student government had this thing where organizations within the, college community could pitch and actually get funds, but they had a core mission. These are funds that are going to be used across the whole body in some way, shape, or form. And then year after year, film students would go and try to pitch. And basically they did what you called out. They were pitching their money problems. And before they went, I was trying to guide them a bit like, look, this is what they're looking for. If you can somehow position this in a way, it'd be very tricky to do. But if you could do it in a way where they were on board because these funds are properly being distributed in terms of their mission and purpose of these funds, you could get a chance and get some funding. But when they went, they basically just said, here's our problem. Can you fix it? And, not surprised. Everybody said, nope, you're all set. Sorry. Thanks for coming, But it's an extreme example, but if you think about it, it does kind of put things in perspective. Like try to look at it. If it's so black and white like that, then something needs to change in how you're pitching.
Yeah, well, I see this kind of misalignment happening all the time, right? I'll hear from, I'll go to an event and I'll see a cool studio and they're working on, just as an example, math games for kids. Really fun games to help kids, understand math, or what like name whatever sort of more impact or quote unquote serious game. And they're kind of new to the industry because maybe they're coming at it more from academia or education, and they're, hooking up with some designers, and they're making this beautiful game. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And, great. And then they're like, well, can you introduce me to Devolver? We hear they're like one of the best publishers. Like maybe they'll want to, publish and fund our math game for kids. And I'm like, do you like, have you looked at the Devolver website? Like, sure, you heard they're one of the, great publishers, but like, listen, that is not, they don't care about.
There are going to be some unhappy parents if that happens.
We put some blood and shotguns and, some pixel pixel whatever, but. So I see that all the time where it's like they're not taking that step of empathy or alignment. It's just like, oh yeah, I heard Devolver was like a great publisher. Maybe they'll want to give me some money for my math kids game. And it's like zero. You have like zero. Like no.
Yeah. And one thing I say here on the show often is know your audience. And guess what? Your audience isn't just your fans. There's lots of different audiences out there, and being mindful of those. Speaking of publishers too, I mean, I figure this is important because sometimes some of us still go in with these ideas, mindset for any number of reasons, stories, feelings, whatever. Are there any common myths that are around investors or publishers that you'd like to debunk, especially now since, the climate's changing, it's difficult to navigate, and through that, there's going to be emotions, of course. What things can we debunk about these people that are, just doing their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on both sides of the fence, and I think the main thing is they're not evil. I mean, most of them anyway. I mean, there's certainly some questionable ones out there in the world, but I would say those are by far the minority. It really comes down to the stuff we've just been talking about, which is empathy and alignment. And so, if we're looking for money for our kids' math game or our art award-winning game, and none of the investors want to give us money, it's easy for us to say, oh, they're evil, they're just bloodsucker, whatever. But it's like we don't we're not taking the time to understand what their business is. We're not aligned with the things that they're looking for. We're trying to solve our missing money problem, where they're not trying to solve that for so they're just optimized for something else. And if we're not in alignment with that as well, then it may seem like they're kind of against us or evil or so again, there's definitely a spectrum, and there's better ones and sort of less better ones. But on the whole, I would say they're not evil, and it's just a question of understanding how they work and having that empathy and alignment. That being said, I would put out there that self-publishing is always the ideal strategy, and then everything else is an excuse. So which may be hard for some developers to understand, but if you are embracing the fact that you are in a fan building business, then you're going to want to be especially greedy about all your fans and eyeballs. And so you do not want anyone to kind of intermediate between you and your fans and you and your community, which is inherently kind of what a publisher does, right? They're like, oh, hey, Andrew, go back in the basement, do your coding and animating. I'll go talk to the influencers. I'll go set up the press. I'll go talk to the fans. We'll manage the Discord, all that kind of stuff. And so even in doing a good job, a publisher is kind of diminishing your ability to capture your fans. So strategically, it's always best to self-publish. Now, reality sets in. People need funding. People don't want to do whatever, and so excuses. In some cases, very valid excuses. And then you go get a publisher. Now, what's interesting is other forms of support are popping up. You have project funds, so like a Kowloon Knight, for example, or Outer Sloth. Right? Remember last summer, Inner Sloth announced their project funding scheme, which is called Outer Sloth, where they give you funding for your game on a revenue share basis, but they're not your publisher. They don't do your marketing. They don't talk to your fans. They don't do any of that stuff. They just give you the money you need to get the job done. We have ghost publishers where you can hire them and they're kind of behind the scenes in the shadows, but they're doing a lot of the tasks and work and supporting you and coaching you and so on. So there's a lot of interesting kind of other support schemes that are starting to emerge as we see the value of developers directly engaging with their fans and what kind of success that brings. Now, listen, there's a lot of great publishers out there. I mean, of course, Devolver, we mentioned a couple of times, they're amazing. They're great. They're wonderful to work with. fair terms, great people, obviously massive amount of success. But, your game is kind of like the next great Devolver game. And then it's hard for you to build some of that long-term sustainability in your own studio. So even if you sign up the best publisher, the fairest terms, et cetera, it's still kind of suboptimal in terms of long-term strategic value and sustainability.
Yeah. And I love that you make that point too, because I think too many of us, I've heard it firsthand from others where, hey, I'm just going to rely on publishers because of X, Y, or Z reason. And, my stance on that too is aligns with yours, is just like, well, if anything, you're just going to set yourself up for more success or have a strong foundation to build off of if you understand what's required to publish. It doesn't mean you need to know everything, but let's take a lean approach to that learning. Understand, keep a pulse on it, understand things. Like one example I think would be a perfect way for anybody to do this fairly quickly. I'm not necessarily endorsing him, but it's a good book. Scott Miller came out with a book about, publishing, indie game publishing, essentially. And he covers over every spectrum of the industry, high level, but really good stuff. If you know just the high level stuff of that, you have a good enough pulse on these things. At least now you can set your expectations. You know what you might need to dig into more. And again, you have all the groundwork. So whether you go with the publishing route or not, you still have kind of at least a good foundation to go from. Because like you said, Jason, if you just rely always on someone else, and let's say you don't have that crutch anymore, what are you going to do? That now you have other problems you're trying to solve for.
Well, and along those lines, this sort of challenge of evidence-based investing is that you kind of have to start self-publishing anyways,
right?
In order to generate the evidence, right? So one of the things that I often advise is presumptively self-publish. Assume that no deal is coming, and sort of set yourself up
I love
to
that.
have, to be able to do it. And which means what? That you have to do your market research, you have to think about the audience, you have to pick a viable genre, you have to think through the marketing strategy. Okay, we have to announce the game, get some traction, show that there's evidence, like you have to do all those things. But guess what? Those are also the things that then the publishers and investors are looking at to decide whether or not they're going to fund you. And so in kind of like an ironic twist, it's like if you ignore all the people with money and you just do your thing, build your fan base, announce your game, do all that stuff on the assumption that you're self-publishing, all of a sudden they come poke you.
Yeah.
And hey man, I saw your announcement, like great job, 200,000 trailer views and 50,000, like, hey, do you need some money? And like all of a sudden they're pitching to you and they're sort of, depending on the scale of, reception of the announcement and stuff, but like one of the studios I advise is Fun Selector. They do a bunch of racing games, and they've been building that momentum from game to game because all the games they do are car race based games. And their latest game, Over the Hill, is like a 4x4. You're kind of out in the mountains going, and they did their announcement weekend, and they got 200,000 wish lists. Like boom, they opened with 200,000. No special. They didn't spend $1 million on YouTubers or Twitchers. Like it just, they announced the game. All their fans went crazy. It got shared everywhere. 200,000 wish lists, and like a month or two later, like they're up at 400,000 wish lists. And then guess what? Then publishers, they're a self-publishing studio, and now even the biggest of the biggest entities are saying, "Hey, good job. You need some money." Do you want a partner? And he's like, no, I'm good. We're doing our own thing. But it gives you that leverage. It gives you that option. You're setting yourself up for success, by your own means. And then listen, if an offer comes that you can't refuse, it's, whatever, you have that offer, that option, you have way more leverage. It opens the door to Kickstarter, it opens the door to platform deals, to Game Pass. Once you have that mindset of, I am presumptively self-publishing this game, and you do the things required to build that momentum, like all the doors start opening up. Yeah. So that's just kind of one thing.
Yeah. Love it. It's like, folks, if you can, or take the time, I wouldn't say if you can, just make the time, do what you can do to maybe shift your mindset. If it's not already there, it can make a world of a difference. Speaking of a world of a difference, I want to get into a kind of a broader topic here that I think is really cool. It totally relates to everything we were just talking about a minute ago too. Kind of like, like ecosystems and growth, like just kind of the industry as a whole. Because I mean, you've helped shape entire regional game dev ecosystems, right? I'm just curious because I think knowing this stuff is going to be really helpful, just kind of spreading the word, doing what all of us are here to do, right? Could you break down what a healthy ecosystem actually looks like, and why do you feel that's important to I don't know, the work you're doing and the work just like all that we would probably love to achieve in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, these are all great questions. It's like almost every question could be another 1 hour
It really could be.
discussion. But yeah, I mean, in many ways, the ecosystem stuff is kind of a follow on from the work that I was doing with IGDA. Really trying to help the industry professionalize and grow and improve. And I kind of joke sometimes saying that like I'm in the business of success. Like I'm trying to help developers to succeed. And then you think of that on a more systemic basis. And then all of a sudden you have countries around the world that are trying to also help the game companies in their country or region to succeed. Why? Because that creates jobs, it creates export revenue, it creates value within the the country, et cetera, soft power, and all these kinds of things. And so I get random calls from Brazil and Uzbekistan and South Africa and New Zealand, all over the world of like, hey, how do we lay the foundation to enable game developers to succeed, in our region, in our country. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is enable local talent to create original games for global success. You want the people in Brazil or New Zealand or Azerbaijan or whatever to be able to make games, but their own games, like original IP, not do work for hire contracts, not subcontract, whatever, but to make their own games, and for those games to reach a global audience. So that's like the tip of the iceberg. Like that, like if you can terraform the country to enable local talent to create original games for global success, then you've succeeded. Now, of course, that's the tip of the iceberg. There's a million things under the water to enable that statement to become true in terms of funding and talent pipeline, incubation of new IP, scaling, accelerating on global scale, access to international markets, all of that kind of stuff is like pieces of the puzzle that then, when I work with governments, that I go in to help them sort of, lay those foundations, plug those pieces of the puzzle that are missing to kind of to enable that high level statement to become true. Normally, that also means that the ecosystem is what I call well coordinated, meaning the developers, the academics, the educators, the government, the finance community, like all of these, call it stakeholders, are all communicating and working together to achieve that goal. So you want a well-coordinated, well-synchronized ecosystem, which then sometimes becomes the work that I do as well. Is like you kind of go in and you find all the right partners so that they're all talking and understanding, once again, that they're trying to align success, achieve the same thing, which is developer success, export revenue, more jobs, less brain drain, all these kinds of good things that are good for a country's economy. So stuff like that. But I mean, I'm just barely scratching the surface. This we can go on and on and on.
Yeah. But I would say one key thing I'd pull from there, and you're right, there's so much, but like it's coming down to that communication, because I've seen in different places too where, like, at any level, right? Communication is really where I think a big part of it comes down to. And I don't mean to like oversimplify this or distill it too much, but that is at the core. Because like you said, you go in and with governments, for example, and make sure that they have that clear understanding to then properly set that foundation for communication, and other stakeholders, even let's say community leaders within those groups and in the industry, like having that communication and everything else, it will grow and everything from out, and all those other aspects that you're talking about that we don't have time for, I'm sure, start coming together.
Yep.
Well, I know we're coming on time here and everything, and I wish we could go on forever. But unfortunately can't. So before we close, we obviously discussed a lot. For people listening today, takeaways, tips, suggestions? Is there anything that you could share with them based on our conversation?
Yeah, obviously we covered a lot of ground. I think some of the key takeaways. One is define your success. Then make games that can achieve that level of success, and also, as we said, like have alignment so that if we're co-founding a studio, our partners, the team, we're that definition of success is the same for all of us. So that's kind of key number one. Define what success means to you, and then solve for success. Next is to reframe your business as a fan building business. It's a subtle shift, but it's a very critical shift, and will make a huge difference in how you approach building your studio, thinking long term, creating sustainability. So embrace being in the fan business and sort of ditch being in the game business. You're in the fan business now. And the third one is kind of what we're talking about with the publishing and funding and all that kind of stuff, is presumptively self-publish from day one. Assume that no publisher is coming to save you. Assume that there's none of that's going to happen, that you have to make the smart business decisions, build your audience, community, all that kind of stuff. Just assume you're publishing from day one. And surprisingly, like if that goes well and you do it properly, then all of a sudden opportunities, offers, deals, are going to sort of fall in your lap, as crazy as that sounds. So presumptively self-publish from day one.
Awesome. All great tips. Can't thank you enough for sharing them. And, before we close and, you drop us some links and stuff like that, what's that promotion you have going on? Was a masterclass and such that you got going?
Yeah. So I partnered up with Chris Zukowski, famously the Steam Whisperer.
Yeah.
Really the guru.
A friendly or voice, I should say, on the show as well.
Yeah. So Chris is fantastic. I'm like, his number one fan. We partnered up to do a whole masterclass on funding and pitching, and all of his courses, including the funding pitching masterclass that I did, are going to be on sale. So folks can go over to howtomarketagame.com/courses, and you'll be able to get discounted access to those courses.
Yeah, and folks, we'll also have a link in the show notes too, so be sure to check those out. There may be something else in there too, but for right now, we just know that there will be a link in the show notes. But otherwise, like Jason said, you can head over to howtomarketagame.com/courses, or check out the show notes. And for this, it would be rengenmarketing.com/the episode number of this show. Jason, I can't thank you enough for being here. Hey, if people are looking to connect, get in touch, what are some good ways they can do that?
Yeah, probably the best way is just on LinkedIn. There's only one Jason Della Rocca, so pretty easy to find. So yeah, folks can just sort of add me on LinkedIn and take it from there.
All right, excellent. Well, folks, connect with Jason if you want on LinkedIn. Otherwise, Jason, it has been an absolute pleasure
Thank you.
having you on the show and everything. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Keep up the great work. These kind of resources are so invaluable to all the up and coming developers, and even the experienced ones that still need a little push in the pants from time to time. So thank you so much, Andrew.
Yeah, appreciate it. Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.